Hey Daniel, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, and everyone can see you. You're on a big screen. So, thanks for being. What time is it for you right now?
It's 7 a.m. in Nairobi.
Okay.
Very chilly
Good,
morning.
good morning.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for this program. Um, Definitely gonna, open it up to questions from folks that are in the audience in a bit. But maybe I can just get you started off maybe by talking about Yeelen, and we'll just kind of talk about that as a way to kind of talk about maybe your work in general and the broader program. But I'd just love to hear maybe like the first time you encountered the film Yeelen and what it meant for you after that first encounter.
Okay. I think the first time I encountered it, I heard about the film years ago, but it wasn't available for viewing anywhere. I couldn't find it anywhere. And then in 2020, I think that's when you guys reached out for this particular project, and we thought maybe it would be the best time to kind of get a hold of the film. And so I think 2020, 2021 was the first time I watched Yeelen, and I was awestruck because I had never seen anything like that before, made by an African filmmaker. I think it kind of it had so many things that I didn't understand it at first. So it took me a while. It took me like several watching it several times for me to kind of understand what this I mean beyond this the main story of Nyannankoro, like all these other elements. I had to kind of go back and look into like do some research on like the Como society for me to kind of understand um what the secrecy and all these other themes
Mm.
that are featured in the film are about. But yeah, I'd say it was 2020, 2021 was the first time I watched it, and I watched it so many times. I think I was watching it every week, and I'm still watching it, like
Mm.
yeah, I think it has had a big influence on like what I think about spiritual practices on the continent and the history of our spiritual heritage as a
Mm.
people. Yeah.
Can you maybe say a little bit more about, I guess, that?
Oh, okay. So like I think the film is grounded in the cosmology of like the Bamana people of West Africa, and I think it presents like a world where spiritual forces permeate the sort of everyday rituals of life. I think in a way Caesar kind of claims the power of African myth by positioning like the cosmology of the Bamana people not just as folklore, but as a complex system that sort of still has a contemporary relevance, because when I watch it, I feel like it's saying something to me in our current day today. Um, yeah, I also think like the central theme in Yeelen is like one that is of passing of knowledge across generation,
Mhm.
which is embodied by the Como society. I think that the journey of Nyannankoro is sort of seeking the power of light, which is a symbol for like knowledge and spiritual enlightenment, which is something that we're always, even today, we're still kind of going through that process. And so I think this metaphor like translates into like contemporary relevance by emphasizing like the search for wisdom as an ongoing process, which is also crucial in both personal and societal evolution, I think. Yeah, I think also like the film is also like about attaining like applicable practices, and these practices are like practices that help us sort of make sense and make meaning of the universe. And I think that's what also like is being explored in the film. Um, I think also the film's ability sort of explicitly showcase how symbols and objects are not just as tools, but
Mhm.
also as vessels of power and memory. I think that's a crucial thing in the film. I also think that the presence of like ritual elements such as water, um, fire, play a significant role in that they depict not just they're not depicted as just backdrops to human action. I think they're also like conscious entities that kind of have their own agency. Like the element of fire is very, very much present throughout the whole film, and water, and like the relevance of these elements. So for me, I think the director Cisse kind of reclaims these aspects of African mythology by portraying sort of the natural world as like imbued with
Mm-hmm.
sacred significance and consciousness, which is like a perspective often marginalized by modern ways of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, no, I mean that's a lot. There's a lot that you really gave us to think about. And to that point, I'm interested, in the context of this project, experimentations, imagining knowledge in film, and even, we've had conversations about this, but just kind of the way and through our project, we're thinking of what science is and what systems of knowledge are. And so I'm interested in what for you is science, like through the programs that you've done for this program, the writing, the in progress writing that we're working on. What for you, like what's the framework of science for you and how it relates to um uh the films across your programs and Yeelen and your film as well, Smoke Jumpers.
Okay. Okay. So I think science for me is just a way of knowing, sort of finding ways to finding a way to kind of understand what's happening in our universe, I think. There's obviously like the mainstream science and what people think science is, especially when you go to universities, which is a lot of like empirical material, things that can actually be proved physically, and but for me, I think it goes beyond just the physical realm. Um, so for me, I think my thinking of science is based on like what my ancestors were, what they thought about science, and um, for them, nothing ever existed in isolation. And so I think the way sort of this relates to the program for today or tonight for you guys in LA. This process of sort of repossessing the spirit of myth is sort of an act of like reclaiming and revitalizing the mythos of the African people. And it's a retelling of those stories, sort of that define our cosmologies, and not merely as relics of the past, but like as living, evolving entities that continue to shape and inform our modern identity, culture, and also spiritual values.
Mm-hmm.
Because for me, I don't think you can separate spirit from matter. I think that was like a Cartesian thing that kind of came into this continent during the colonial period. And so, but before that, there was no separating the spirit from anything else. I mean, everything had sort of was imbued with spiritual significance, which is what also the film Yeelen kind of depicts.
Yeah.
So for me, I think this idea of like you can't separate myth and like and science in Africa, because like mythology was like a way of sort of finding a way to sort of cognitively sort of express ideas to people using stories. And
Mm-hmm.
so for me, I think mythology, which is what we kind of which is what our work is based on a lot, is like a tool. It's like a psycho-spiritual tool that allows for individuals to sort of navigate liminal spaces. And what I mean by liminal spaces are like those in-between states of transformation, where you go from not knowing to now knowing,
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And so I think through cinema, these stories are not just retold, but they're also re-experienced.
Mm-hmm.
And this means taking viewers and immersing them in the symbolic, metaphysical, and also like the ritualistic layers of the different cosmologies within African societies. I think it also signifies like a restoration of power, which
Mm-hmm.
challenges colonial representations that
Mm-hmm.
kind of have long distorted narratives from our continent. Um, yeah, so I believe like this very act of sort of repossessing or repossession is sort of is also a form of healing. I think it's a form of healing because we get an opportunity to reconnect with those parts of ourselves that have been repressed in order to sort of fit in within the colonial structure, the structure of a colonial worldview. So I think by sort of repossessing these stories through the work that we are also doing with ASFA, I think we can, or our aim is sort of discover and build upon something that is a viable response for the growing group of people, especially in my country, the growing group of people who cannot find within these legacy religions and empires a proper sort of home to cultivate our humanity, you know. So I
Hmm.
think that's what we are kind of trying to do, even with the program, is sort of extend the definition of what science is beyond just what we've kind of been taught in school,
Hmm.
because I think that's a very limited way of looking at things.
Definitely.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I want to ask you one question about smoke jumpers before I open it up. So I
Cool.
want to make sure there's space for any questions in the audience. But yeah, you talked about healing and the description of smoke jumpers, talks about an ailing world. I'm interested in, yeah, what for you, yeah, if you could talk more about what you mean by an ailing world, and there's a context of what is represented in your piece, but obviously
Yeah.
I'm assuming it's going to link in some way to the context of our contemporary moment. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So maybe I can give a little background on how like smoke jumpers came into
Mm-hmm.
being. Um, so smoke jumpers is a sort of mythical portrayal examining like the cultural dynamics that when mismanaged can sort of result in potentially environmentally and socially harmful charcoal use and production in Kenya. And so this collaborative work was put together by an organization called Invisible Dust, which was funded by a climate compatible growth program. And it involves a lot of conversations between Rebecca Klub, who's a social scientist at the Institute of Sustainable Resources, University College London, and Wangeshi Ngugi and I, representing Art and Science South Africa. So the film kind of explores the ecological function of mythology and the space for indigenous systems in mitigating our modern challenges through a visual narrative that kind of links the personal with the cosmos, guided by six main research questions. So the research questions were: what is charcoal? How are the consumers of charcoal and who are the consumers and producers of charcoal? Why are there concerns about charcoal? How is charcoal regulated? How do bans impact charcoal reliant communities? And do alternative approaches to charcoal exist? So one of the main things was for the idea of like the reason why people are using charcoal in my country was because it's the cheapest form of energy. It's the cheapest source of energy, and so it's mostly used by a lot of people who are economically disadvantaged.
Hmm.
And so this idea of an ailing world, maybe the ailing world wasn't necessarily the right word to use, but like it's a world that it's sort of eating its own resources and it's hungry for more resources, looking for more resources,
Hmm.
and probably cheaper resources, you know. So um so yeah, so that was like a reflection on what is currently happening in my country, where a lot of the people who are economically disadvantaged, who are the majority in my country, are the ones who end up using charcoal. And charcoal has this very destructive thing for it kind of it's the leading cause for why there's a lot of deforestation, especially with indigenous trees in my country.
Hmm.
So the idea of, I mean, the people who are using charcoal is not because that they it's not like they have a choice, you know, they just need to survive. And that's what I guess I meant when I said ailing. They just need to be able to take care of their families. And because of the economic situation that my country is currently going through, there are
Hmm.
not that very many options of making money. So a lot of
Hmm.
people are kind of taking it upon themselves to go into the forest, cutting trees down so that they can be able to sell, I mean, burn that wood for charcoal and sell it. And it's all profit because it's not their tree. You know, you're just going to make so much money in a very short period of time by just cutting one tree. One tree can give you like at least 4 sacks of charcoal. And one bag of charcoal is like, goes for like, I think $20 in Kenya.
Hmm.
And that's like a lot of money here. You know, that's something that people can survive on for a whole entire week. So, so, so the idea was, like the things that people kind of put themselves through, where they kind of sacrifice their future for short-term benefits, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of what we were trying to address with the story of smoke jumpers. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah.
No, thank you. That
I
was
don't know
a
whether I
no,
answered
that
your
was a
question.
comprehensive answer, right? Like
Oh,
it, really contextualized it in the current moment and just yeah. Yeah. No, thank you for that. So if anyone has questions, observations, comments, you can say it and then I'll repeat it to Daniel. Um, yeah. Can also be about Yeelen because I really think yeah, you said you're still still rewatching it at points, still kind
yeah.
of trying to disentangle what it means to you. So yeah, it could be about Yeelen or smoke jumpers. Um, Daniel also mentioned an initiative, I guess you could say, Art and Science Films Africa, which, maybe you could talk about in a bit, but yeah,
Mm,
floor is open.
okay.
Yeah,
So
wasn't it?
I can go.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So yeah. So our work with Art and Science Films Africa is to investigate ritual practices in prehistoric Africa and the role that art plays as a remnant of the knowledge informing these rituals. So I'd like to first of all start off by kind of defining what I mean by the term ritual, because it's kind of a
Mm-hmm.
term that has kind of been misrepresented very many times, especially here on the continent, because every time you mention ritual, people assume it's, devilish things and all these things. Anyway, so by ritual, I mean, for me, ritual is like a form of serious play, where, using our imagination, we can kind of imbue spirit into a set of kind of actions that are ordered towards serving a purpose. And so through film and video art, we aim to build a bridge to link indigenous systems of knowledge embodied in mythic stories with contemporary Africa. And it's usually through a process that involves the idea of exploration through experimentation. So for us, we are not necessarily interested in how art can explain science or vice versa. We are more interested in the new ways of seeing, thinking, being that kind of emerge at the intersection of these two seemingly opposing disciplines. Yeah, yeah, that's sort of what our work is about. And yeah,
Mm.
yeah,
Yes. Oh, I see a question. So they're gonna say it and then I'm gonna repeat it for you.
okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm. 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 So I'm gonna take the last part of your question. I think that was um so h how can you explain without um Western frameworks of knowledge the presence of spirits that are real? Does that does that feel like that nugget? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, Daniel, did you hear that?
Just repeat the question again.
Um, so we have a question about spirits and
Mm.
um so the central question and I'll add on if necessary. Um how can you explain spirits without, I guess, the using the logic of Western thinking.
Hmm. With the presence of spirits without using the, okay. That's a difficult question, but it's a very good question. Well, my understanding is that spirit is not separate from matter. You know what I mean? Like it's there's no duality between spirit and matter. I mean, like matter is what you see, and spirit is like the thing that you don't see, like the energy behind everything that has a physical dimension. Say like before you see the rain, there's a process that happens before the rain sort of falls, right? Um, this it's the same as like it's very difficult to explain because it's the same as like when you produce like when a seed kind of germinates and becomes a tree. What sort of force is there that kind of allows for this process to happen, you know? And so I think that process, that force is what I mean by spirit. For me, that's my understanding of what spirit is. It's the thing that animates the physical reality. You know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
yeah, it's the thing that kind of gives everything else definition. Like it defines like a physical reality and like the physical things that we encounter on a daily basis. So like in my traditional practices, everything has a spirit. Even a rock has spirit. It has energy in it, you know, it has its own sort of force behind it. And the idea here is that my ancestors had this awareness and they had kind of found a way to manipulate the spirit world in order to kind of be able to get what they kind of want in the physical reality. And you see that with the common society where this guarding of this knowledge is because if people understood the workings, the inner workings of nature, then they'd have the same power as the Kom have. And that's where like that knowledge of like the inner workings of like
Mm-hmm.
the forces behind nature were very secretly guarded because if that knowledge was to somehow leak, if it was to get out into groups of people who are not necessarily initiated in this order, then it kind of means that common society becomes sort of useless because then they don't have this political power, which is defined by the fact that they're the only ones who understand how the natural forces work. You know, they know
Mm-hmm.
exactly what plants to take if you have an ailment. You know, it's the same thing as like how doctors understand how the physical human body works, even
Mm-hmm.
if regular people might not necessarily understand how that works. So I think my definition of spirit would be it's the force that kind of animates the physical reality. And it's yeah, it's the force behind our physical reality and it animates everything.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether I've answered that question, but at least I've kind of given my.
How, yeah, how does that feel for an answer? Or is there like another little nugget you want to ask about? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm. Hmm. So the question is noting, yeah, just clearly like a very particular choices around colors, movement, even with the slowness. And so the question is, asking about your process and asking about your decision making um, in terms of, I think, the visual material that we see in the film.
Smoke jumpers.
Yeah,
Oh,
sorry, smoke jumpers.
oh,
Yeah.
okay. 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 So I think the most prominent thing about smoke jumpers is the smoke. Um, and apart from the obvious representation of the negative environmental impact of burning wood for charcoal, the film kind of also draws on the ancient practice found in many cultures all across the world where smoke was used to transmit messages over long distances. So we kind of expanded this concept into a broad exploration of communication across different realms of being. And so where like the colored smoke acts as a bridge between like different states of knowing. And these states of knowing, you can think of them as like there's the empirical knowing, conceptual knowing, symbolic, mythic knowing, embodied knowing, collective, all these different kinds of knowing. So I'd say like this colorful, this colorful play of smoke becomes like a metaphor for like the layered sort of complexity of knowledge, where like truth is seen as like a dynamic and contextual is
Mm,
seen as like dynamic and contextual, yeah, rather than like a fixed singular perspective.
hmm
Um, the slowness is pretty much just like the time, the passage of time, it's also there. It's also very present in Yeelen, where like the director kind of holds us short, and then like he kind of shows these movements, which you might think are kind of absurd because like why do I have to see someone like moving from point A? But he kind of wants to show the movement of time, the passage of time, and I think that's
hmm
also what I was interested in also capturing with like the slow motion shots. It's sort of like being able to sort of meditate on that passage of time, like being able to sort of experience that time as you're like sort of watching the film. And yeah, I think that's what I'd say about Smoke Jumpers. Yeah. I mean, I can go on and like kind of compare like the similarities between Smoke Jumpers and like Yeelen if you want me to do that. But yeah, that's what I have to say about Smoke Jumpers for now.
mm mm
Yeah. But there are definitely very many similarities. I mean, like the idea of also like crossing a liminal space is also very much present in Smoke Jumpers, where like we see like the protagonist entering this space of like where she's kind of trying to cross between like the mortal world and the immortal world, and like in search of like knowledge and new meaning. Yeah.
mm. Thank you. That answer your question. Okay. Can maybe we can end on maybe you talking a little bit about some of your current projects because I know you're working on things or ideating about things that seem really interesting. So yeah, could you just tell us about what you're working on or thinking about right now?
Okay. Um, So currently, I mean, we have very many projects in development. One of the projects is a sort of docu-fiction. It's kind of a documented, experimental documentary, but it's called Singwaya, and Singwaya is like the mythical origins of the Mijikenda people of coastal Kenya, and so Singwaya is sort of like it delves into the rituals of the Diruma people of the Mijikenda community in modern Kenya, and it kind of explores like the consequences of humanity disconnecting from nature. And so, like, through the perspective of like the Duruma Council of Ritual Administrators, the film examines how like modernity's dismissal of indigenous knowledge systems has kind of disrupted the delicate balance between humans and their environment.
Mm,
So,
mm,
yeah, so it also kind of draws parallels between like the Duruma people and the and global contemporary issues, showcasing how like the alienation from ancestral practices has also led to the environmental degradation, but not just environmental degradation per se, but also like a deep crisis of human identity. Yeah.
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm,
yeah, so I think for us, this documentary is like an exploration of like the loss of spiritual heritage and sort of its impact on both the community and like the individual. And it's an invitation to kind of reflect on the cost of like modernity's
mm-hmm,
pursuit of progress. Yeah, that's one of the documentaries that we are working on. We also have a feature film because it's not easy to get financing for projects in Africa. So we what we do is we kind of try and like extrapolate some of these ideas. Like so now we've developed another project called Kianjaka, which is just finished developing it. It's a fiction film, and it also kind of just sort of translates whatever I've said about Singwaya, but now in a sort of in a fictitious story.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
So those are the two main projects at the moment that I say are ready for production.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Yeah, but we also kind of, if you check out our website, we are also sort of trying to play around with creative text and sort of because it's easier to sort of it's not easier, but it's kind of more affordable for us to create video art and then like you kind of contextualize the video art with like creative text to give it a bit
mm-hmm,
more context.
mm-hmm,
So that's what we've been currently doing on
mm-hmm,
our website as we kind of continue fundraising for these other bigger projects that we have going on. Yeah.
mm-hmm. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank
We're
you so
gonna
much.
you see you again on Sunday, so
See you
don't
guys.
get tired of
Thank you.
us.
No, no,
But
no. This is amazing. This is amazing. I'm enjoying myself so much talking about my work.
yeah, no, thank you. And also, I mean, I just want to note that, you folks in the audience probably know or maybe don't know, Film Forum is mostly dedicated to kind of experimental work. And I think I really value when there's a moment to kind of resituate narrative in the kind of arc and trajectory of Film Forum's, I guess, presentation milieu and just like kind of yeah, kind of situate ourselves in a narrative and think and kind of take the things we're thinking about usually in the context of experimental film, but think about it in the context of narrative. So I really appreciate you and Yuan Getchi's work as a whole, but also giving us a narrative moment um, to have this conversation. So yeah, I just want to thank you, and I want to thank everyone for attending this program. Yeah, and thanks for zooming in, obviously from Nairobi. Looking forward to Sunday. And thank you to Ben and Quinn for helping us put all this together. But yeah, thank you everyone. Have a good night, and thank you, Daniel. There's lots of
Thank
clapping.
you.
I don't know if you can hear the clapping.
It's okay. Thank you so much.
Yes. Okay. Thank you
Okay.
again. Hope
See
you
you
get
guys.
some
See you on
sleep.
Sunday. Yeah. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.